Well, the coronavirus has hurt a lot of companies, and a lot of up-and-coming companies really copped it during that time when shareholders were so scared they just dumped stocks. Now, one company that had a really good 2019 was EML Payments. I'm talking to the CEO, Tom Cregan. Tom, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Peter.
Look, a lot of people wouldn't know what you guys do, so explain to us what EML Payments is its main fare.
Yep. No, so we're a financial technology company. We're a payments platform that various corporates and governments use for various programs. It could be gift cards, or it could be distribution of welfare. It could be financial services. We deal with companies across multiple industry segments and kind of power the payments within those businesses. So
Okay.
I think today we've probably got maybe 3,000 programs around the world, something like that.
Okay, so in a sense, you're a behind-the-scenes business, but can you give us an idea of maybe one product that lots of Australians would know where you guys are effectively powering the activity?
Yeah, probably in salary packaging, I think, which a lot of Australians would know. So we are a B2B provider, you're right, and providing services to the likes of Macmillan Shakespeare, Smart Group, other listed providers in that space. And what we do is provide a card or a payment service to the doctors and nurses and not-for-profit workers that enable them to spend their packaged money, their tax-free portion of their salary on items that we restrict so that it complies with the tax laws. So they're free to use that, for meals and entertainment and living expenses and so forth. But if they tried to access that money through an ATM, that would be rejected. If they tried to access that money for international travel back in the day, that would be rejected. So we manage that service, and we've got about 240,000 accounts, in the market now, servicing Macmillans and Smart Group and others.
And I guess it also improves the accounting of all this, which is very time-consuming and costly if you're looking at each individual, how long they spent interstate and what they spent on, that sort of stuff. The card, in a sense, I guess, simplifies it and creates a lot of efficiencies.
It does. I mean, particularly for our customers who are the providers, the salary packaging providers, there's a lot of back-end efficiencies, because in the past, people would have used personal money, to buy an item, and then they would have sent that receipt in to the provider. That would have had to be tabulated behind the scenes. It was pretty manual, whereas now the software is doing 100% of that. So it's managing individuals' access to funds. It's managing where they're spending it. It's managing all the reporting. Manages all the makes the tax part of that much simpler. And so we launched that in 2016, 2017, and recently completed a launch with the New South Wales Ministry of Health for all of their various health departments, and recently signed a contract with the ACT Health Department as well. So that's one that I think quite a few Australians would be familiar with, given quite a few access salary packaging benefits.
All right, so when the coronavirus hit, when you looked at the potential slug to your business, albeit short term, what were you thinking? How was the business going to be negatively affected in the short run?
Well, in the immediate sense, about 55-60% of our business comes from gift cards that are sold in real estate, in property, in shopping malls that are owned by real estate trusts and so forth. And that, in the month of March and April, just substantively closed because of social distancing and forced closures. So that percentage of our revenue went from from a pretty strong position to effectively nil, on March 10 onwards, which is a pretty dramatic, very dramatic hit. we had concluded an acquisition in the UK with an Irish business that operates in the UK and Ireland, which we concluded on March 31, which is a pretty sizable business in its own right. So we knew the impact would be short and pretty painful on the mall side, but we also knew that we had a pretty good asset coming into the business, which it did on March 31. So we felt like it'd be doom and gloom there for 90 days, but then we'd be able to trade out of that reasonably well.
Yeah, and the market has responded positively. I guess since March 23, when the market responded positively, just about everywhere. Looking down the pipeline, Tom, some people are saying, well, I don't agree with them, but a lot, as you know, everyone becomes a social expert. Like, we're all experts on viruses now. We're all experts on what people are going to do in the future. I noticed that even Warren Buffett said yesterday that he's dumped airlines because people aren't going to travel like the way they used to be. But he, of course, made the reference that he was dying to travel. He hasn't travelled for 7 weeks. So we make guesses. Some people imply that people won't go to shopping centres as much as they used to in the past. Are you factoring that in and saying, well, we'll be looking for growth in other areas other than shopping centres, or do you think that there's exaggerations around the changes that will happen to us?
No, I think they're reasonable. To be honest, I think I think they do recover, but I think that recovery might be 2.5 years away. I think that what they were in some countries, malls are a strong part of the business, so of the kind of social culture. So the Nordics remained open, funnily enough. But Germany, UK, Italy, these are pretty large markets for us. I think there'll be a shift to online that comes out of this isolation mode that I think is pretty hard to dispute. I think when malls reopen, which effective today in Texas and other states in the US, they're opening, but still with social distancing. You've got question marks over the viability of merchants within those malls. I mean, only depending on whether it's URW or others, there's only 20 or 30% paying their rent. So how viable are some of the merchants within the malls? I've read articles about delays to supply chain channels and the merchandise that's in the stores. So I think they do recover, but I think that part of our business probably takes 2 to 2.5 years to recover.
Yep.
But we've always had a view of wanting to keep a very diversified business that isn't too exposed to one vertical, but
Yep.
But arguably that one got too big for us at about 55%. So as that comes down and we focus on other verticals, then that may take, as I said, 2.5 years to get back to where it was. But plenty of other things will fill the void.
Yeah, and is there a vertical, as you call it, for online that you can get some equivalent, inverted commas, card in an online way?
Yeah, we do support those, but and normally they would be a part of the revenue mix, but given the properties are closed, they weren't even selling them because they'd be selling gift cards without the ability to let someone redeem them. So as they come back, as the malls start to reopen again, they will be selling them online. But then I think it just comes down to traffic, and I also think, I mean, I'm sounding negative because I think our shareholders should think of it as a 2 and a bit year recovery for that segment. But recessionary impacts have got to be significant. I mean, the rest of our business, things like salary packaging that I talked about before, is not a discretionary item. That's part of somebody's salary that's being used on everyday items, on food and entertainment and living expenses. In Europe and in Australia, the digital banks that we're partnering with I mean, banking is not discretionary. That's people using that as their primary bank account. And so part of our business is non-discretionary, but part of it that is the malls. And I think that if you've got 30, 40 million people unemployed in the US, and you've just got to think that there's a recessionary impact on consumer disposable income and on discretionary spend, which is a gift card.
Okay, so
I think that
Yeah, sorry, Tom, for interrupting. But what then?
No, you're right. Yeah. You go. No, sorry.
Yeah, so therefore, what is going to be the blue sky that you guys are going to pitch towards? You've accepted that there's a recession effect. There's going to be a shopping centre effect, and you've said you're well positioned with the other parts of your business. But the Irish acquisition, is this going to be something that's going to be a bit of a fillip to the organisation?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, the logic behind it's funny how things like COVID, just hit you unexpectedly. But the purpose of that acquisition was to continue to broaden the tech platform and broaden the customer profile. 42% of their revenue was welfare or government payments related. So the UN, for example, is one of their customers. UK government is one of their customers. That part of the business probably goes up now as a result of COVID, just given more government spending and more subsistence and welfare payments to kind of vulnerable individuals. The other 42% of their business was digital banking, so the use of using their technology for someone to use as an alternate to their primary bank account, which I think is a long-term driver and will outlast any COVID impact. So only a small part of their business is COVID impacted. But the strategy was to buy them back in November when we announced it, and to broaden the tech and the customer base. And I think that would have been good ordinarily, and with COVID it becomes great because it just becomes the need for that becomes more urgent. Obviously, with malls now on a recovery path, and I think since January they're not seeing any real drop off in sales activity. They're not seeing any real drop off in implementation programs that are already in their system to do. And outside of malls, neither is the previous EML business. So I think since January, probably across multiple different segments, whether it's consumer finance or fintech or digital banking or others, we've probably signed 20 customer contracts, I would think, in that period of time for programs that will launch and start to generate revenues for us. So that was already the game plan, but it just becomes far more urgent. You've just got what would have been a plan to do that anyway just becomes concertinaed and becomes more urgent to get traction on it quicker.
Tom, just as I was listening to you, my last question, it kind of reminded me that what you're talking about, the cards you're talking about, are in many ways like the old coupons that people had during World War II and the Depression, where government basically gave coupons that could be redeemed at shops for particular staples. Is that a relevant kind of comparison?
Oh, look, in some countries it is, yeah, for sure. Like the Spanish government is talking to us. I will say with government, there's a lot of urgency on their side as well to think about how they're supporting their economies and how they're supporting their people. But whether it's the Spanish government, the UK government, there's a lot of Italy. We're doing programs with governments. We're doing programs with charitable organisations. In the US, for example, we launched one with United Way, which is a Uniting Church charity, which distributes money to people that they just consider vulnerable. So people in need of emergency kind of assistance. It's totally mobile driven. So if you're getting $1,000 for groceries or what have you, It's a digital token sent to your phone. There's no physical card. There's no plastic. It's sent to you. You click a text. You've got it, and off you go and spend it. So we're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing that in domestic violence charities in different parts of the world. So there is that opportunity in that market, but it's a feel good story because there's a commercial opportunity, but there's a very positive social story to it as well.
Tom, thanks for joining us on the program, and good luck going forward.
Good on you. Thanks very much.
Well, thanks for joining us on the